Hey guys, Edre here, and this video is going to be a little different. It's going to be about Depeche Mode once again. It's going to be an album review. I am going to go through all of Depeche Mode's studio albums and reviewing them, as well as some of their live albums. And these reviews aren't going to have a rating out of 10 at the end, because I genuinely enjoy pretty much every single album I am going to be covering here. Because I've said in my last video, I think Depeche Mode is the greatest band of all time in my personal opinion. I think they're consistent, I think they're ever evolving and changing, and I love that. But I'm going to go into a little more depth on why I feel that way by going through and reviewing every single album. So let's start with their debut album, Speak and Spell. Now, for some people, they feel like this album hasn't aged as well. It's from 1981. It's very primitive sounding compared to some of their later works. I mean, the synth sounds are very typical of your really early synth pop. Very, in some places, like ear-piercing because they're so analog. But the way the songs are put together really utilizes the equipment they have. And I'm going to be talking about some of the bonus tracks and B-sides from each album. First off, I have to bring up the fact that during this album, during the sessions, Vince Clarke was in the band. This was before Alan Wilder joined. And he was the main songwriter of this album overall. And you can tell that. The typical dark Depeche Mode style and sound that I think we have grown used to, especially lyrically, was not yet really dive too deep into on this album, and a lot of it has to do with Vince Clarke's more pop-friendly songwriting. To start this off, I think most people here know the hit single "Just Can't Get Enough," which is on this album, which is really what I would say kickstarted their career into the relevance of the public eye. I mean, "Dreaming of Me," "New Life," these were all songs that were known, but it was really "Just Can't Get Enough" that I would say pushed them to that popularity that would be ever growing throughout their career. I want to bring up that some of these songs have different versions. Photographic, on the Some Bizarre compilation album put out before this, which was technically their first release, had a more upbeat version of Photographic. And I personally like that a little more than the album version. But the album version fits the album a little better. The album has a lot of space to it. There's a lot of empty space, and I feel like that was intentional, because a song like Photographic was clearly more upbeat, but they scaled it down for the album. And Dave singing on here, Dave Gahan, I want to address his vocals, because you could tell that this was before his confidence was as high. You know, in many songs, he's kind of scaling back the his approach. You know, I feel like Photographic, he sings it much more aggressively when he does it live versus the recording. The song Puppets is one of my personal favorites on here. I think it has a really rockin' riff that is one of their best ones from their early days by far. The song New Life is honestly at this point a classic for me. You know, it's kind of what got me into the album, got me into some of their earlier works, because I was more used to that kind of middle area with Violator and everything. And so I want to talk about the B-sides as well. Ice Machine, one of the greatest songs Depeche Mode's ever recorded, period. Ice Machine is, like most songs on this album, or during this era, are often overlooked. You know, they get pushed aside as being so poppy and pop-friendly that any actual substance gets overlooked. And Ice Machine, lyrically, you know, yeah, it's very abstract. It's very not, like, the deepest thing, but it is. You know, at the same time, you know, the way it's put together, the chord progression, you know, the synth noises, the droning. I'm lost for words, but the droning synth with the very simple but kind of like intriguing drum machines, and the harmonies were there from the start. And Ice Machine is, I think, one of the greatest songs from this era. But you also have Any Second Now, which you have really two different kinds. Spotify's really messed up lately. Like, they keep on naming everything the same, but I do have it on here. Yeah, any second now, Voices is the first song we actually get, which is sung by Martin all the way through. And I gotta say, pretty good first track to be like, singing heavily on. I would like to see some of these songs get pulled out live. That would be nice. But overall, how has this impact? How has this album impacted the overall group, the progression of the group, and where the group had, just the sound and the style? Well, Depeche Mode style-wise, the aesthetic of it, they didn't have much of their stuff really figured out yet on this album. It was still very early. They were still kind of dressing kind of goofy looking back on. And, but when it comes down to stylistically, this is the only album you'll find that actually sounds like this album. I've seen people say that some of the tracks on A Broken Frame are kind of similar to this, and I get that. But because of Vince Clarke's contributions, this album is definitely unique. It's a unique one in their discography, and it's probably why they don't revisit a lot of these songs live, is because as a band, they have a different lineup. The main writer from this album's not with them anymore. They've kind of, progressed a good amount from here. But needless to say, this album's of its time. It doesn't sound like brand new, groundbreaking, but it doesn't sound so cringy that I just can't listen to it. So yeah, Speak and Spell, overall, I think for a debut album, this is a good album. I think that it gets a lot of hate. I feel it's a little too much, mainly because of songs like What's Your Name and some of the more goofy ones that are a bit more kind of silly. But good album. They were definitely starting to explore with all the synth stuff. Vince did a good contribution. Overall, good album. That's about it for this review. Speak and Spell, 1981, Depeche Mode. I'm going to be... My next review, not in this video, probably today, it's going to be of one of my personal favorites, A Broken Frame. And that is it for now.